Well, good morning and good afternoon for everyone who is joining us for our recording in progress. We are proud that this talk is hosted by FCSI MENA region for the first time. And luckily, we have an amazing speaker done before his young age. Asal B is an influential entrepreneur. He's an innovator and thought leader known for his human-centric approach for technology and business. He is the CEO and founder of Wings, a research and development lab that focuses on creating autonomous, sustainable businesses through advanced robotics and AI. I will not go through his long profile. I can say that he's a director of human-centric innovations at Expo City, Dubai. He has more than 2 decades in urban development and sustainable autonomous business models and numerous startups, all built over innovation and futuristic approach. Haytham includes the development of Hive Robotics. Well, the take that I quote Haytham for what we expect today is to inflect the mindset change for a well overdue transformation or even a reinvention in how we foresee the service. I leave it for you now, Haytham.
Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate that. So to cover the basis today, I'll share my screen in a second, but essentially I'm going to cover the industry as a whole. As a services industry, FANDV stands as one of the components of the services industry. We're going to cover things about automation in the guise of AI. We're going to cover things about experiences in software, and we're going to touch base on robotics and workflows. So each of those topics could essentially be an hour, 2-hour lecture on its own. So we're not going to dive deep into many of them, but we're going to give an overview across just to kind of see where I would say trend, but where things are going and what we need to do as an industry. So feel free to ask any questions throughout. We'll pick a few, but we'll leave most towards the end. Like to be collaborative and make some mindset changes if possible. So give me a second here, okay? Okay, so our talk is about intuitive tech for in-person services. I will jump right in. Okay, I want to touch base on where we're aware and where we're heading and why this change is becoming very influential moving forward. I call this the evolution of I. We start with the industrial age, and throughout this graph, you'll see the different ages that we flow, but alongside it, you'll see something I call the access to knowledge. Essentially, what it indicates is that in the industrial age, the knowledge or the, let's say, innovation and the technical expertise for society was sitting in scoped zones. So it wasn't accessible by anybody except if you were within those industries. Then as things moved forward, we came into what we call the intellectual age. This is where essentially the knowledge base, the universities, libraries, scholars, research has come into play. If you wanted to know certain knowledge, certain information, or access to those, you had to be within the scope of these. And these were still within the physical scope until slowly scaling into what we call the information age. Essentially now information has spread out of these scoped industrial and scoped certain zone areas into, it's getting smaller and smaller, but the knowledge itself is expanding in terms of accessibility. That's where the internet age came into be. Essentially, everybody slowly started getting access to, if they have access to the internet. I remember back in the day in Abu Dhabi, I had to go to a certain building, I had to go to a certain room, in a basement, to a computer, to go online to get some data. Now it's in my pocket. I can get it no matter where I am, I can get the information. So its access is not so much getting it, but also the versatility of how and when I can get it. Now we're approaching to something we call the individual age, where access to knowledge now is becoming not just local, but hyper-local, micro-local, and down to the person. And we are essentially in the cusp of this. We're almost like hitting it, and we're going into what we call the intuitive age. The difference between all of this is the scope was all about things or material things or around information. Whereas as we go to the individual age, the scope is around the person. So essentially now the way that we think about technology and how it works is not about systems, but it's about a human within a system. So this is something that is where we're heading from that perspective. Now, of course, this is where intuitive ecosystems comes into play. We're talking about smart systems now, but smart systems essentially is talking about things, smart buildings, but nothing about the human essentially. In many cases, actually burdens the human even more. So now we're going to intuitive systems where the systems actually take into account the human, not generally, but down to the individual uniquely. So with the age of AI and automation, I predict, and I think many already are predicting, but by 2030, by 2040, AI will essentially outthink everyone. Robotics and automation will outdo everyone, which really begs the question, why are you here? What is then your next step in this industry, especially in services? Now, creativity comes into play, is becoming the topic. A new socioeconomical creative economy coming into rebirthing into an environment where the mundane and trivial mental tasks is now in the background somehow. So what does that ecosystem look like? And what does it need to do to really kind of nurture this creative innovation that we're speaking of? Essentially what it means, if this is true, then more entrepreneurs, more F&Bs, more services can pop up running operationally with less individuals, even one-to-one, while everything is automated and the individual is the creative instrument, essentially, to really bring up value to society. So the transition from where we are today to that, in terms of a nurturing ecosystem, really comes down to that the human mindset changes as well, in terms of self-preservation and fear mindset. Looking at a current ecosystem like any city for that matter, if somebody wants to go ahead and build a business, especially let's say an F&B, since this is the scope of the session, it takes guts. It takes a bit of boldness to say, I'm going to invest 500 to a million AAD or dollars towards an F&B, and hopefully finger crossed I can get that in and get away from your typical job day to day. So that model is becoming questionable as we move forward, because we need to lower the barrier to entry. This is what innovation is about, is to make it more accessible. It's to make it more and enabled for more entrepreneurs into the system, more creativity, essentially. Intuitive tech, which what differs from smart tech or any other technologies, is that there are particular important aspects. It's the people-first approach, meaning I'm about the experience. I don't really care so much about the technology. What experiences that I would like to unlock that was not possible before? Forget how I do my business model today. Forget how I create my experience today. If I want to enable an experience for both my staff and for my customers, because you can't elevate one without the other. Otherwise, the burden will be split. So a people-first approach is the thought process here. Second, the technology that you build in doesn't lead the experience. Rather, it's a neutral participant throughout this experience. Most people will look at AI, especially today, and even robotics, say, oh, we have this robot, let's plug it in. Let's see what we can do with it. Here's an AI, let's see what we can do with it. Typically, that will fail because you're kind of trying to reach out to tech, but you're not really thinking how you want to go back, actually 2 steps back and rethink that, knowing that this technology exists, what experiences do you really want to bring? Third, the digitized lifestyle ecosystem. This is something important. The food service industry, across the in-person services industry, is one of many. A human being interacts with multiple services, even me getting a food. It has to include transport, mobility, some other technologies, logistics, supply chain. So as a human being, my life revolves around a microcosm of services that matter to me. The food service and other services, the more they are isolated and disconnected, I have to carry the burden of who I am and share it with every single service to be able to execute what I need to execute. So moving forward, what we're seeing, because of the individual age, is how do my lifestyle is the key interaction when I connect to a business like an F&B and others, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on. Finally, it's a transparent real-time communication. Humans are very variable, very dynamic. And the biggest problem in the service industry is people, right? It's not systems usually. And essentially you want to unlock people most of the time. Communication is one of those that is still heavily analog, and we need to digitize that. Transparency is all about the internal logistics and external logistics being transparent to all, because that actually allows for more seamless connections, seamless information data transport, and what you can do with this data. Again, we'll cover that later on. Finally, the external logistics and the internal logistics. We call internal logistics, or the on-premise logistics that occur within a business. External could be essentially you're delivering outside or you're bringing in supply. All of that, they need to merge. The awareness of what's going between the two needs to now become integrated very highly for a more seamless, let's say, experience across the board, and how it integrates with the city actually. And the problem with that is essentially analog. So let's talk about what does it mean to digitize an industry. The F&B in particular, which I'm going to focus on because of this session, but this topic really covers all services. And when I say in person, meaning the service requires you to be physically there. Even an ATM machine is to me an in-person service. I have to be there to do something transactionally. If I go mobility, so if I exist in front of a service. The online ordering like DoorDash and other ones like Uber Eats and Talabat, these are e-commerce, non-in-person services, although it does inflict the delivery part of that. Now, particularly the F&B service industry, it kind of in reality stopped innovating since 1955. And some of you may want to kill me by saying this, but in reality, it stopped innovating. Essentially, the McDonald's brothers who did the speedy service system are the ones really who stood back and decided, hold on a second, let's us rethink the completely internal logistics. Let's rethink the input and output of this box model. Let's re-engineer the systems that we build and actually create new technologies within it to align to this new experience. When they first did this, people were just completely confused. They didn't know what to do. They were just like, this thing doesn't work. But then when they realized it, the mindset shift changed the whole system. Since then, really, we haven't really improved upon that much. What we have improved upon really just additive technologies that we'll cover too as well. This industry too is highly labor intensive, right? There's humans involved in essentially labor work. I'm not talking about the creative work. I'm talking about the labor work, which is the transport of information from point A to point B, whether it's moving things around, whether it's handing off things, whether it's storing things, whether it's taking things out of storage, whether it's putting things into the fridge, whatever it may be. It's highly labor, which means that data that exists, that workflow, that logistical information is sitting on a human being. Unless you put a GPS track on them, you have no idea what's going on. The manager will have no clue. So to automate anything within that on-premise and external logistics is almost impossible. And this is something that cannot happen overnight, and we need to start to think about moving forward. With AI and robotics comes into play, the non-value added work will go away. Will bring back upon, give more value to the creative influence. The chef should have way more time to be able to taste their food, to take their time to do their work, where everything else is automated. The human-to-human experience in the restaurant or a cafe, as an example, needs to be elevated. I'm not there being a robot just to take an order. It gets to be something much more than that. So knowing fully well these coming into play, what does experience bring into play? What does logistics mean? What does ordering mean? What does in-person experience really mean? It's also the least digitized industry. And don't tell me a PDF menu or some online website or Instagram is a digitization. We're going to cover what true digitization really means and how it needs to interact live between the nodes of humans, staff, and the business itself. So this is critical. In no means this is a bad thing, but it's an opportunity. But with these top three things, this is blocking this industry from automation. As much as Silicon Valley and the automotive industry are creating this automation and robotics and artificial intelligence, they can't really get into the physical area. They're all in the ether. They can do great jobs in terms of the stuff on the cloud, but I'm in person. I'm physical. Can we make something new in the physical experience? True digital service, I'm going to cover this really quickly. This is what we mean. And it doesn't mean we're going to have this overnight, but I mean no paper, no emails. Emails came from a business world. It hasn't to do with F&B service, right? I still get emails today that if I come tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. and order a burger, I get a drink for free, even though I'm vegetarian, and somehow they know what I'm going to eat tomorrow. So there's a lot of humanity things that we're dealing with humans as a habitual data point, rather freeing the human to be whatever they want, and the business needs to be adaptive to that. Phone calls are analog. WhatsApp, what's with WhatsApp? The whole Dubai logistics is on Facebook's metadata. It works, great, but it's still analog because it's not really can link and automate off-chain, in-chain, external logistics, and there's no data that you own. You're giving it out to other people. No point of sale. This is something that will go away. Point of sale is an act of friction. Imagine experience, I come in, order, have my food, walk away, right? What does that really mean? The ordering and the payment are one-on-one. They cannot be separate from each other. So we were talking about something we call the fluid economics, where transactions are fluid as you go. There's no necessarily a bill or receipt that you have to pay. It's just happening in real time. No forms. Lines or queues is a challenging one, but this needs to start to going away, but at least increase transparency. The idea of websites, PDFs, and all of that will go away to something more of a digital portal that's live, presenting what's going on in the F&B business or any service, and so on and so forth. A lot of the solutions require software and hardware, right? Even the thinning of business operation needs to go. If you look at all cafes, for example, at least here in Dubai, you took at the full stack, 90% of that stack is the same. From the brick and mortar all the way to the logistics, all the way to the front of the house. Only the top percent, which usually changes by, I'm going to select some different beans, a coffee machine, and some marketing materials. So there's a lot of duplication that can be thinning out, that you platform this whole industry as one. This is what I want to, part of our research. Typically, innovation is cyclical. Usually what happens is most of the innovation in automation comes from industrial engineering or system design thinking before it actually comes out into the market, and then staggers out into what we call applied sciences, and then it becomes peaking, meaning that these technologies, which was very expensive, slowly trying to get into the market now, and essentially peaking, meaning it cannot quite innovate. It's not technically revolutionary, but actually just little evolutionary. So this is the time frame where, for example, McDonald's system was designed, the conveyor belt was invented here, even the ARM-based robotics was back in 1954. All that starts in this real deep research. And then it started to come into applied sciences and peaked. And we can start to see some of these robotics innovations back in 1950s are coming into the market today, including the single arm robotics you see that's making you a cafe, and there's triple the line waiting outside. When this happens, typically a next generation of R&D comes into play to replace all of this to something that's more applicable that's coming through. And because all this tech has nothing to do with AI, has nothing to do with human experiences, has nothing to do with anything else. The issue with the F&B business is that it borrowed technology from the automotive industry and borrowed technology from the Silicon Valley and just kind of layered on top over a business model that's already struggling. And if you recall, when you ordered something from a business, it was a single channel. I had one line to go in to order, and then one by one, and then there's another line for checkout to get my order out. And the logistics adapted and designed accordingly. Now we start adding a phone call. Now we're adding digital online ordering coming through, meaning that I'm standing in line, which I'm supposed to be next, but there's either a phone call or 6 other online orders coming through. So how is this working? Now there's a drive-through. Somebody else is ordering something else there too. So now we have multi-channel input. You have a digital bandwidth of input coming into this box, but the internal logistics hasn't changed so much to adapt to it. And you'll find businesses like Starbucks, Chipotle, Panera, what they do is they duplicate certain of these operations, almost doubling the cost to say, okay, now drive-through has its own espresso machine, its own storage, has its own thing. walk through or take out as his own thing, which really complicates things and adds more cost. So it's not really helping. So we're looking out to what exactly do we need here, and we'll talk about why these solutions are problematic than actually solving real problems. And to be fair, if they were, they'll be everywhere by now. So if we go back a bit, if you took one example, and one of my favorite ones is this Q-commerce, or let's say basic input-output design. Typically, orders coming through are digital. When you deliver the order outside is also digital. When you receive the order, you fulfill it, sometimes digitally and sometimes analog, if you want to create the order yourself, or if it's pre-packaged, it's ready to go. At the outside, the handoff is typically either a person or a shelf, and then it needs to somehow go from that to another device or a person to take it out. For the most part, let's call that digital. But the biggest bottleneck, it's not about the creation of something, or typically only the handoff. It's this what we call the delivery workflow in the middle. Essentially, it's taking something that's fulfilled, storing it, accepting it, validating it, keeping it. When somebody comes in to pick it up, or any source of pickup, somebody has to go in, find it, resort it, retrieve it, and hand it off. This today is still highly analog. And no matter how much you digitize this and you automate this, no matter how much you digitize and automate this, the middle part will bottleneck the whole experience. So if you think of a box, it's an input and output. The bandwidth is highly limited. So what is the issue here? And what do we need to solve here? And the robotic solutions and automation storages does not solve this problem. Essentially, and I think mentioned this before, the interconnections of on-premise and off-premise automation systems, they need to be more interconnected, meaning no human intervention. So when there's a human moving things around, we call it a discontinued system. So we need to start to think about how we can create more continuous systems as much as possible. We need to support for concurrent operations. A lot of the operations are sequential, but how do you support concurrency? Meaning that my input and the output can be concurrent, meaning I don't care about the middle. The middle could be completely automated off my back so that if somebody decides to come in through drive-through, pick it up, it doesn't really matter, somehow they'll get it. This is where innovation comes into play. And so on and so forth. Don't want to spend too much time here because that'll be a lecture. I'm going to just make fun of these for a second. I love them, but there's some issues here. These are cafes that I've seen around coming into this is where the peaking of robotics come in, where the cost of these has come enough down. They've been operating for a very long time, so they're reliable. And that's why that's being utilized. The single-arm robotics have limited reach, right? If you have a big restaurant from drive-through, from people walking in, people accessible with wheelchairs, how does this really scale? Doesn't really. This one are floor-based navigation systems that limit versatility. The problem with floor-based robotics is that they have to do 90% of operation to avoid people and 10% of actually the business value. And it's non-concurrent. It still has to go to one table, another table, another table. So it's not really solving other than taking away from. It's an incremental solution, but it's not really solving the core issue. All of these offer very slow transport for supply chain workflows. I've visited a lot of, ghost kitchens who try to adopt these, and they had issues. And there's a reason for that. Most ghost kitchen spaces are not very huge and very tight, and it sometimes has issues navigating. The sequential operations of this is also a bottleneck. And anyway, this can go into a lot more lectures in terms of why this will not work. We need something new to come into the industry to help us out. I go back. These solutions are a mix of solving stations and workflows. My point is that moving forward, we need to address the workflow, which is the station-to-station operations, meaning how do I get something from one station to another in an automative way so that I can track, make sure it's secure, make sure it's safe, and so on and so forth. When you are going through this automation process, the workflow is critical. And automating station without doing workflow automation essentially bottleneck the whole I/O of the business. So businesses coming in to automate a machine that makes 100 burgers a second, it doesn't matter, because how you get it out there, how do you sort it, how do you put it all together, this is how to go from one station to another so they can actually go to a customer. That's where the issue comes into play. It's all about I/O. It comes back to science. It comes back to math. It comes back to bandwidth. What does the I/O look like? And you start with the workflows with most friction, and you work backwards. Typically, you go from front of the house back, supply chain and back, and then you start automating the middle part. This is where the things are more complicated. The reason why a lot of these robotics come into play, which has an issue, they come from an industrial factories and what we call a deterministic environment. Everybody knows their purpose, that what they need to create, what they need to build is pretty much very clear. A human being coming to order, oh, I want something, but I don't want this. I want that instead. Then I need to pick it up here. I may come in 10 minutes. It's highly dynamic when it comes to human input. So the environment of an FMB is highly dynamic because humans are dynamic. For example, I could order something to pick up, but when I go there, I decide, you know what, I'm going to actually pick it up through a drive-through, because I don't want to park the car and pick it up inside. It's almost impossible. You can't do that because there are two separate storage systems for the drive-through versus that. So again, we need to make it more versatile. So the point is, elevate the experience. This workflow automating lecture, it discusses how different models you can use to automate station to station, something called the pre-station automation and station-to-station automation. And there are thoughts throughout this process. There's a whole video on this. You can watch it on YouTube. This document will be shared to you. I went through what that looks like. It was aired, I think, back in 2021. It wasn't really advertised, but I'm sharing it with you guys here. The goal here is actually, as much as assembly time to ready time to pickup time, is how do we make sure that this time is very short and make sure that the human involvement is minimal so that we can get it from the kitchen to the person as cleanly and safely while ensuring the operations are not afflicted as much as possible. This requires innovation in that field. So I want to also move into a topic that covers, which we call automation levels. Just the same thing that we have in AI, same thing with electric vehicles. They've come up with automation levels. This is an example of what we presented as part of our research. 5 levels of automation. It's 4 here, but ASR 0 is a traditional retail, and it covers what it means each levels look like, and how far are we from getting to ASR 4, and what does that experience entail? That YouTube actually covers that too as well. This is an example of a model where you have a single system, one system, that takes multiple input from multiple stations and have what we call a distributed short storage system, meaning that these storage systems are non-human accessible. They're stored somewhere. And essentially, then the output can be anything you'd like to as well. This model is what needs to be innovated, what we need in those businesses as well. And this can get very technical, but essentially it's a separation of concerns. This one, essentially the distributed storage, the goal for it is to ensure that it is not tied to an output. It is separate, meaning that if I decide to come in to pick it up here or drive through, it's from the same storage system. While the stations are focused into creating and putting it in, creating and putting it in, and let the system figure out the rest of it. Now, that was workflow automation, hardware. I want to go back into what I call the real-time UI or micro experiences. We're moving towards this individual age where every person that coming into the restaurant or service of businesses are unique. LFA means lifestyle attributes. This person is vegan, gluten-free, doesn't like pineapple, he's allergic to eggplants, this person loves meat, this person, etc. Whatever lifestyle attributes they bring into the restaurant when they connect, the restaurant or the business has multitude of services. And by the way, it doesn't mean menu. If you have Wi-Fi, if you have outside seating, if you have bathroom amenities, if you have parking, all that is digitized and communicated. So these are what we call services. There are no products. Only when a person connects to the business, these services that are rendered for this user, relevant to this user, is generated dynamically. So products are created in real time for this person. I look at it, now I see things that are relevant to me. Whatever I pick, I'm good, I'm safe. The other thing about this is bidirectional. At the end of the day, the business will capture data about all of these people to understand, hey, by the way, you have 20% uptick of vegans who doesn't like gluten, for example, or allergic to gluten compared to 1 month ago. So that's also very relevant too, that we're missing that data. So how do we automate that experience altogether? Essentially, an AI sits here, an AI sits in every single individual. So how we think about communication is changing moving forward, where every person, every experience is personalized, while the business be able to have more data than they ever could before, and experiences they could not develop before too as well. Here's a concept that we played with. This is a company in Massachusetts, in the US. It's called Protein House. They had pages and pages and pages of menu. It's a health place, and it was huge. We had people come in, and I decided to come in and manage the business for about 11 months. And halfway through, COVID kicked in, which made things a little bit challenging. They had, I think, a permutation over 300 menu items, and people would come in and they're health conscious. So they wanted to choose and pick, and they would really just wait to decide. And it took anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes to decide, then wait in line and then order, which made the queue longer. And people would actually come in and see the queue and leave because like, I can't wait another 30, 40 minutes to make an order because it's just so much stuff to choose from. And we did a whole survey on the community. On top of that, if people are really caring about the health data, about allergies and sensitivities, that was in a document somewhere on a website that somebody has to download and read 150 pages of documents on, which was really challenging to understand. And unfortunately, the people who are working there, they're not doctors, they're not nurses. So there was a big inflection point there. So with that being said, I wanted to take a moment to showcase what we did with them in a very low form. I'm not going to show everything because of the time. And if you guys don't mind, I will demonstrate this. Just confirm that you guys can see this. Richard, looks good, right? Okay, good. So I have an iPad here actually beside me, which is what you see there. Let me just log in. Okay. This iPad that you see in this right corner, which I'm connecting to the machine here, this is the what we call the communication portal of the system. This is what they have running. It's a simple iPad. It's connected to the systems, and there's a lot more things there that I'm not going to cover, but I'm going to go a simple example. On the left here is actually the experience the customer has. They log in. It looks like a typical digital menu. They can see their items and everything like that. So what we're going to do first, we'll talk about the customer experience. So essentially what we did is every person who joins in, there is a heart icon, which is please tell us your lifestyle. And the system actually pulls in the restaurant data based on what's happening right now and give you the options of what would you like. So, for example, if I just want to focus on vegan food, I would say, okay, I don't want this, I don't want poultry, I don't want fish, I'm just completely vegan, and they can assess that. And it will show them the menu of items that are vegan, as an example, right? So pretty straightforward, they can tag. Now, let me show you something else. So for example, let's go back. I would say I want vegetarian. And you will see, interestingly enough, this, I'm going to actually remove vegan here too as well. I'll actually just add as much as I can here and fish. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that these burgers, these buns, are either can come in different forms, could be gluten-free, could be cold, could be anything you'd like. And what we decide the business does, it showcases to the customer the best thing they want to sell to them. Okay? So if I go back down here and decide, okay, you know what? I have gluten-free that I want. If I don't want gluten-free, for example, the same item is shown, but the bread changed. So you can actually just order this bread. I can see exactly what I can choose. I can look at, okay, there's 2 people working in the kitchen right now. One of them is in training, so I can understand it could be a little bit slow. Here are all the ingredients that I can have from this particular burger. and so on and so forth. So this can actually get pretty complicated. So also I can say I'm allergic to pineapple, so I can remove that. And that's really interesting. So this is one side. A customer can actually configure their lifestyle, and this is stored with them. The next time they go to a restaurant, they scan, they'll get what's suitable to that. And the restaurant says, oh, Haitham just joined in, and that's his lifestyle data. Now we have data about the persona of our customers that we didn't know about before that we can assess. On the right side, essentially the iPad, we'll show an example. We had at one point this product called Titan. It was a very hot item, was selling really, really well. And we realized that it dropped like almost 30% for some reason during the spring. And then we did a survey and realized that the Titan actually was not picked because a lot of the people coming in were vegan and they don't like honey. They can't eat honey as a vegan lifestyle persona. So if they actually went in and they said vegan or simply said, I actually don't want honey, the system actually creates Titan still and replaces the honey with agave, so you can still buy it. These are the things that we work with the chef, and they can design the system to say, okay, no, we have an option. But instead of showing all the possible options, show what's relevant to the context, because people just will be lesser items to sell. The other side of the equation too is if the user does not make any changes in the front end, the back end is also affected. So in the back end, this is actually connected to our system, but I can actually say, for example, hey, we're out of honey right now. So I'm going to say we're out of honey. There's no honey. And the UI automatically changes all the items that reflect that change dynamically. So you're never going to order something they don't have. Similarly, if I say, okay, some items can convert, but there's certain items that they require avocado, and I can say, you know what, I don't have avocado here. It will go away and update accordingly. There's more things that this system can do and can actually really reflect on the LFA of this particular person. But now we have a bidirectional communication. The business state can affect the menu. The customer state can affect the menu. And every single person have a very unique experience. Pretty much nobody, almost nobody have a similar experience. And this is essentially a little tease or a little example of what that looks like. So that's really what I had today. I think that's about 41 minutes. That's not too bad to cover a high level of these topics. I could go into way more detail through all of these, but I saw some questions coming through. I'm happy to address them as we continue. How does that sound? How does it look like? Thank you, Richard.
One question or comment was about cross-contamination in allergen. Is it a problem that can happen, and how do you think you can solve that with robotics or automation?
Yeah, we had this issue with Protein House too. So a lot of the vegans and a lot of the people who have also religious things that yes, I cannot have bacon, but I don't want them. I'll make sure that my meat is not cooked where the bacon is cooked, as an example, like Muslim, religious, or kosher, however it may be. So the industrial term is separation of concerns. So the way that we actually designed it is technically we have a vegan / vegetarian / like meat eatery. Robotics can actually, and I don't like to use the word robotics because robotics tend to sound like a human or arm or something like that. But essentially what we do, we compartmentalized different orders. So when orders comes through, the automation system can say, okay, this is the machine that you want to use, or this is the cookery you want to use, and not this cookery. So essentially the staff or the chef, as it comes through, they don't have to think, where should I go? It's exactly where they need to go. Number two, some businesses, this is taken into account that the automation system is not doing the cooking itself, but rather the chef is doing the cooking. So making sure that they're not doing both. So sometimes we had to duplicate the work. But communication is critical, number one. We didn't know. A lot of people didn't want contamination or they cared about these two things. So we wanted to make sure, can they communicate that properly? Not to the waiter, but all the way to the chef. And does the system warn and make sure that this ingredient's coming through right now needs to be cooked separately? So it needs to be solved by communication. And number two, separation of concerns of systems. where that goes. And I think collect data first to see how much of your community requires this over the other.
Talking about data, Götz has a concern. How do you address data safety or data security?
Yes, absolutely. So interestingly enough, the customers were visiting PH when they actually registered with the account. They didn't realize that their pockets of LFA data, which is the lifestyle attributes of their data, was actually stored on a blockchain that they own, which means nobody has access to it, only but the person. It's only when the person interacts with the system. So when they connect to the portal device that you saw, it says, I would like to access your blockchain data to collect your LFA. I primarily say, please, I don't want to die. Please make sure you get that data. And the system will take that data to what we call a GIT operations, just in time. Essentially, this is what you need to do right now. Take that data, ensure you deliver it. And we don't store it on the business. So it's a floating, and then it dies off immediately. The goal here is we will give you historical data across all the community, but we're not going to give you data per person. The reason is because the tendency is to say, okay, Haytham is this. Haytham is going to eat like this. This is what he does, which is untrue. I have days where I'm like, I'm going to try chicken today. I'm going to try something else today. You need to start less bucketing people. There's trillions of dollars investing in targeting people with data, but the future is about the data the human is variable. You need to adapt to know that this human can change his mind anytime. And that should be okay. So what do? How do you address it? Focus on your logistics. Don't try to bucket everybody so you can minimize operations and sacrifice the quality of experience. So we don't share individual data, but we share holistical data. So PH would get, for example, at the end of the month, by the way, there's a lot more people looking at your menu half an hour after you close, maybe keep it an hour later. Or you have an uptick of vegans and gluten-free, about 20% since the last 2 months. Maybe you need to update some of the menu items and here's some suggestions. So you talk with the chef, for example. That's why most business menus don't change, because they don't know enough. And it can't be based on sales. So, but we need to protect the individuals too working there. And it's also the LFA of the staff. I've seen some staff working on ingredients that they're allergic to. I'm like, well, what are you doing on the station? So, yeah.
You got a good comment from Harley. It says that's impressive. And then we have from Roberto with regard to the cross-contamination that these systems will require a lot of more space, and the space is the most difficult part.
Correct.
Especially in Europe.
So one of the challenges that we in our lab is that how can you automate without using any floor space? So where does the workflow delivery systems occur? I personally, in our research lab, we don't agree that floor space needs to be overtaken by automation. The floor space will always be for humans. In fact, an advanced restaurant should offer more space to customers for the same volumetric volume, essentially. So we decided that we built, and I don't want to advertise too much here, but we built delivery systems and storage systems that are completely on the ceilings or on the walls. That actually opens up more space to the staff, to the customers. And how it delivers is a whole different story that we can cover separately. I agree with you. And if you look at the industrial engineering about conveyor belts and robotics coming in, it makes no sense. If I took a restaurant that does pizza, that does meats, and that does coffee, just these three, and I want to replace them with robots, the space will be 10 times larger, will consume 10 times more power, will be slower also as well, and the maintenance cost is crazy. This is a non-sustainable approach. So I highly recommend look at the ASR video to kind of showcase, there's some imagery to show what could be the future of restaurant look like. So your question is a challenge. So that what you're saying means that we need to step back. How can I make this advanced using less space? So stop with the 2D. We have a 3D space. Take advantage of that. Good question.
Great. Thank you for that. I don't see anyone raising the hand, but do you have any question you still want to drop in the chat?
I know there's a lot that we covered.
I think you created a shock, and it's a big transformation into the industry. to say the least, that innovation stopped, or a breakthrough in 1955. That's a big statement.
It is.
Anyone has any comment on this?
There's a question about, Roberto, how you solve the recognition of ingredients. So this is something that we did with pH too. For example, including my wife, she is allergic or highly sensitive to high fructose syrup, right? Which is fake sugar. But that was ingredients in some certain foods. And it was very challenging to know which is what and what it had, to the point where we had to go into the kitchen and say, show me the bottle, show me the ingredients so I can see, because she may die if you give it to me. And then you have the challenge of working with the staff where they don't know. They really don't. And you have to go to the chef, which was really busy trying to create something very important. And now you're kind of halfway in a restaurant and a hospital trying to make sure that everything is okay. That's not the experience we want to unlock. So in these cases, we actually were able to automate some, meaning that we're able to capture the products that they're using, whether if it's off-the-shelf products or they created, and the ingredients are built automatically, or we actually sat in the chef, sit down, tell me exactly what you're using, be transparent. To the point that even a particular item, for example, let's say back in Massachusetts, they had kale that came from a local farm. And the customer can actually see the ingredient, kale came from this local farm, picked up at 5 o'clock this morning. Dude, this is how far we need to start. And not so much what's ingredient here, where'd it come from? How long has it been? Even me as a coffee connoisseur, I go to cafes, what beans do you have? Where do you get it from? When was it roasted? Most customers may not know this because it's not really as transparent. What altitude? Yeah. Who are you? And so I think we need to get more detailed, and there's going to be an initial effort to do so. But with AI coming into play, scanning and grouping and actually doing analysis on things, this will help us jump that ship forward, moving forward. Yep.
Excellent.
It's a good challenge to have.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we're good with questions, and we're spot on as well on time. We have, do you have any statement? And I'm sure you will find it interesting to discover more. You have the contact for Haytham for initiating further discussions or collaboration or potential review of his solution or the way his company and businesses do. And do you want to talk for 2 minutes about what you have as a breakthrough as a human, and not about the industry? So that you have a movement.
Oh, yeah.
It would be nice to share in a couple of minutes your movement.
Yes. This movement started a while back. So you'll notice that I'm not as publicly voicing as much as before. I've been under the lab for like 8 years, going to 9 years now, and slowly kind of coming into the public because I've seen this thing coming in. I'm like, okay, stop. We need to have a conversation, right? I'm not pushing an idea, but a conversation. The movement is called Life is a Breeze movement. Essentially, the idea is that humanity's way of day-to-day life cannot be the way that we're going to be in the future. And I specifically speak about the in-person services industry, with F&B is one aspect of it. I'll give you a simple example. I look at a mother with 3 children, and I keep using this example in Dubai, for example, where she spent all her life managing their life, essentially, their doctor appointments, their hospitals, their gym, their transportation, their school, all of that, and including her husband, which could be another kid at this point. And it can be crazy. If a doctor appointment changes, if the weather changes, if anything changes, she's on the phone. She's in multiple apps out there trying to reschedule, trying to make things happen, right? And this shows the service industry, which is meant to remove the burden of humanity, is now actually, we are burdened by it because we only took some Silicon Valley technology that has no remnants of humanity, but rather it's only for ether work. And the mother is the last person to take care of herself. So a human does not interact with a business, one. If I want to go, for example, to get something to eat somewhere, do they know me? I have to reintroduce myself every time I visit an F&B. I go to one, oh, the menu's over there. Oh, it's written that way. The prices are there. Okay, and the checkout is over there. Okay, and I sit over here, and then I get to terms and say, okay, what's your allergies? Oh, you have these little icons. That's great. Let me communicate with you. And after 15 minutes, I'm comfortable. I go to a different F&B, start over again. Name is Aitam Al-Baik. So this industry is not really for me. They don't actually care about me. The reality is, as much as you think you do, you don't. And when a mother comes in with children who have their own sensitive allergies, it's a job. They need to come in with an experience to relax, to enjoy the foods that they have, to really talk about what there is to experience. And I think it's time to really take that shift moving forward. And it's not limited to I have a good experience with one restaurant. It's how do I have the same experience across an urban development? And so Life is a Breeze movement is an open movement to the industry to come together and say, guys, what are the standards we're developing for? What are the things that we are aiming that we need to reach together globally and locally? We have a lot of travelers coming from around the world to Dubai. They have to relearn things. Of course, culturally is one thing, but to interact, language, accessibility. I have a chef, a very good friend of mine in the US, who unfortunately had an accident and he couldn't really talk. He lost his voice in some aspects. So he couldn't work anymore because you know how it is in a restaurant. You have to scream and shout everything. So something is out, something is this, and something is that. So now we're even less accessible to people. How can you run a full restaurant silently? Is that possible? So I propose those challenges. I put it out there. And if you think it's impossible, then you can't do it. Then we'll go on to the next one. So there is a cusp of change, and it requires multidisciplinary experiences from software, from the automotive industry to come together and innovate within. We need to stop borrowing tech. Let's start innovating within for full experience. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this, but I can keep going, so I'll stop right now.
Yeah. We have a person. Well, I think it's a wrap. It's a great session. Thank you so much, Haytham.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Our community, the FCSI and the attendees, I guess you created a way for people to think a bit more about what is the future, how we can take forward the industry and put innovation at the center of what we do.
Yep, human experience.
Yes, indeed. And
Human
Frank,
experience.
anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, actually, I think, we will have a lot of discussions about this system. So is it you can transport to every country, culture, or whatever? Yeah. So it's not in every country you have burgers, pizzas, and sushi. So that's, I had a discussion with the chef actually, and he said, I don't know what to use, how to use AI in my kitchen. I want to cook. I say, and that's the reason why you should use AI. Yeah. So if you want to cook and don't care about, what is with the orders, with the offers, with the ingredients, all that stuff. So maybe that's the solution.
There are many, and I think we need to think about it holistically. So
yeah, correct. So that's
the goal is for the chef to gain more time, to have more time to taste, right? So if we can achieve that while still not compromise the IO of the business, then you're checking really good boxes there.
Yeah, and you are right that I call it hospitality is not evenly developed in digital processes. So, hotels maybe have good room service, but restaurants.
I'll give you an example. I'm sorry, I'll take some bit of time, but I stayed in a hotel with long stay, which means you get 30% off, right, in their menu of services. So I was in my hotel room. I looked up the menu. It doesn't have me, so it doesn't have the discount. So I have to do the math in my head. And I saw, they have pizza. Oh man, I'll love pizza. So I'm going to go downstairs. I'm not going to order. I'm going to go downstairs. So I went to the kitchen, to the restaurant at the hotel, sat down, waited. The waitress came in and said, what would you like? I would like pizza. This one in the menu. It says you have pizza. And she's like, no problem. She went out. 5 minutes later, she came back. The chef said the pizza machine is not working. So I'm like, so you didn't know until you actually went to talk to the chef, but the chef knew. And now the menu is such as like, yeah, sorry. So what else would you like? I came for pizza. Where is my pizza? So the communication aspect, internal communication, external communication experiences all across is not there. So you have to think of the human as a multifaceted being. And if you really want to elevate an experience, you want to make sure we need to rethink how this whole model works together. They need to plug and play together. Yeah. Now I want pizza.
Yeah, so they know hotel rooms are empty, full, or sold out for the next week, but they don't know anything about the chairs and the restaurant, right? And the menu and yeah. So
that's an example.
Great.
Yeah. A big flow of thank yous. I think everybody enjoyed this session.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Haitham, I'm sure you will get a lot of contacts.
Anytime.
To entertain the interest we created in this. Thank you again for everyone for attending and for Haitham for leading on this talk.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.